Oh, either they haven't tried it or they haven't been successful, but first-time hydroponics growers are very successful. You can see it all the time. You can go on to any internet channel there and see all these people growing hydroponically. Hydroponic growing is fun too. And I'm not only I grow hydroponically, I grow in soil, I grow in planting mix. I like growing plants. But don't get into this ideology, oh, it's too hard, you won't get it, it has too much chemical in it. It's all crap. Do what you like.
Well, I can tell you from a production standpoint.
Tell them to do what they want.
I've ran multi-million-dollar grows.
Do they do what they like?
And I've done them with soil, and I've done them with hydroponics, I've done them with aeroponics. And the biggest difference is the amount of labor. When you're talking large scale, when you have to have people in there scrubbing reservoirs and changing pipes and changing the things that you need to run the hydroponics.
That is not real hydroponics. That is not how it's done commercially. If you have people scrubbing pipes and stuff, get an expert in there first.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's all about experience, you know. I mean, I could take you guys to an amazing facility where we're doing, you know, both side by side. It really is about your lifestyle, what your choices are, you know, how much time you want to put into it, how often you enjoy watering your plants, how much time you spend away from the house, what the type of freedom you want away from your garden. The more you automate it, the more it'll allow you to stay away from it. The more hands-on you want to be. Different considerations in the mediums you use. If you use a soil that's heavily mixed with perlite, you're going to have to water more frequently than you would if you did not add the perlite. If you use a soilless medium like cocoa, you're going to have to water much more frequently than you do if you use soil. That's basically the idea I was trying to get across. You know, there's just different things that can actually work better for you based on your free time and your lifestyle. When it comes to a personal grow. But this guy knows what he's talking about, that's for sure.
One thing I will say, whether you're growing hydroponically or in soil, is err on the side of caution. And so underfeeding is way better than overfeeding. If you overfeed, you do serious damage. You have the burnt tips on the leaves, and the plant is just saturated with nutrient. If you underfeed, the worst that you'll see is a little bit of yellowing, and then you can boost the food up a little bit. So it's always easier to add more than it is to take something away. If you have overfed your plants, you have to flush them out and kind of start over. If you've underfed them, you just boost it up a bit. And as far as nutrients go, most nutrient companies will encourage you to use as much nutrient as possible because they want to sell you more nutrient. So if it says 4 milliliters per gallon on the bottle, start with half strength and work your way up, rather than just, you know, trusting what it says, going with the 4 and have it. Because the plants will grow fine, they'll look okay, but you'll have those burnt tips. You'll see them in all the magazines, High Times included, where there's just, the tips are burnt. And this is really the difference between connoisseur quality or medicinal quality cannabis and everything else, is kind of lightly fed cannabis is just better in general. It's easier to flush at the end. It's easier to, it burns cleaner at the end. It doesn't have that like harsh, you know, charcoal kind of burn to it, because those are the minerals and salts that never got released out of it. So underfeed, and in watering is the same way. Overwatering is tougher to beat than underwatering. So, you know, learn, you know, if you're growing in buckets or something, learn how to pick up the bucket and know from sort of the weight of the bucket whether the plant needs water or not. If it's still pretty heavy and waterlogged, just leave it alone. If it's light and it feels like, you know, it does when there's no water in it, water. But err on the side of caution always. If you want to win a cup or you want a really great product, it should burn to a really clean white ash. And the only way to do that is underfeeding and flushing at the end with plain water as well. Yeah. Yeah. And that's with hydro, that's with soil, that's with organics, veganic, however you want to grow. Think of it that way. And like Ed said, do grow how you want.
It sounds like in a lot of the advice you guys are giving, less is more in most cases. But considering that philosophy, though, I know there's a lot of people most people who are growing are looking for more in the sense that they're looking to maximize their yield, maximize their potency, and or maximize their flavor, terp profile, whatever. So do you guys have any insider tips on how to maximize yields, how to maximize flavor, how to maximize potency?
I won't talk so much about yield because that's really like the commercial grower's concern for the most part. Quality and essential oil production, I mean, that's what you're growing. You're growing essential oil. You're growing the resin glands that are on top of these flowers. This is why I don't really often recommend like massive CO2, supplementation either, because it's really just growing bigger, but not really growing better. And I think essential oil production is what we're trying to do. And that, there's flowering weeks, 5 and 6 typically, but it depends on the strain, where the plant is in its like kind of bulking up stage, and that's a time when you can add supplements, things like bat guano, which I think are great if you're growing organically, or whatever kind of supplements it is. There's that middle flowering time period where that's when you can actually boost your additives, and that's when you're going to have your highest amount of resin gland production, which is really what we're after. Whether you're smoking the flowers or vaping or making concentrates or whatever, you want that resin essential oil production, and that's the time I think where it's most essential is that middle flowering period.
I've never really been someone who's tried to maximize the size of each individual flower or bud. My method and technique, and what I describe in the book, is just producing more bud sites. So you've got a plant, typical plant grows like a Christmas tree, with one big bud on the top and then descending branches with smaller buds that makes its way down. The one at the top is always the largest one because plants can sense their height. They have like sense of gravity or whatever. It's because they know that the top bud's got the best chance of getting pollinated when the wind blows, basically. So the plant will divert most of its hormone and whatever to that one particular top bud that we call the cola, and that'll get big, and that's the plant's life cycle. You get that big bud that's a centerfold shot at high times, right? So the idea to maximizing the bud, your yield, isn't necessarily to make that bud bigger and compromise on the quality of it. It's just to produce more and more and more of those buds. So the way you really do that is by manipulating the structure of the plant. And instead of letting it grow straight up like that, you top it low and you actually allow it to grow laterally. And then if you maintain a consistent canopy and you never allow the plant to pick that cola that is the highest, that it's going to send the most energy to, it'll distribute that energy equally to each and every one of those buds. So what you end up with, instead of one big bud on the top, you've got a larger, wider plant with 60 of those buds on the top, and they're not necessarily any bigger than they would have been, except you have 60 of them instead of one. And so your yields just went exponentially through the roof. What we try to accomplish with that training method here, and when this book came out a long time ago, things have changed, but we try to say you can get 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per plant indoor in a 4x4 space under one light. And so when you're in Hawaii and you're allowed to have 7 plants, you could potentially grow 7 pounds inside using that method and stay completely legal. And so that's the idea of maximizing the yield. It's not just getting the buds bigger or whatever, but what we've done is over time, experiment, we've realized that there's no effect on the potency or the quality of the bud when you produce the plants in this manner. We published with High Times a growing big in Oregon strain a few years ago where I grew these plants, 6 plants with 1 medical card in a greenhouse, just 6 plants, and they were 15 feet tall by 15 feet wide, and they were like these giant bonsai trees. And off those plants, we ended up getting a little over 10 pounds off of each one, while staying completely legal under Oregon's laws and only using 1 medical card. So we grew over 60 pounds with 1 medical card using those techniques, and that is the way to maximize your yield. It has nothing to do with nutrients, has nothing to do with whatever. Certain strains will do better than others, of course, but it's really just manipulating the structure of the plant from the very beginning. And it's consistently done over and over. I go in facilities where they have hundreds of these in rows, and they're exactly symmetrical. and they know exactly what they're going to get off of each plant within an ounce, give or take, every single time, which is really good for business too, knowing exactly what you're going to have and what to expect. And then again, with the consistency moving forward. When you're training your staff, should you have a staff, on a method of how to grow, you can get everybody on the same page like that, and then you can go from plant to plant and say that one's not right because it doesn't look like that one, and you can really get a system down that will ultimately, again, produce consistency, which I think will be the most important thing, developing your brand or your farm or whatever it is moving forward with all the competition. That's what we see in Oregon, that's what we see in California. Consistency and quality is key for sure.
So, photosynthesis began before there were plants. It began in bacteria. And at some point, a plant cell ingested this bacteria. And instead of digesting it, developed a symbiotic relationship with it. And to this day, remnants of that bacteria are found in every leaf of plant cells. They're called chloroplasts, and that's where the chlorophyll is held. Chlorophyll is a pigment which captures the light and then converts it into an electrical charge to break water apart into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen floats away, the oxygen binds with carbon dioxide to produce sugar. Now, when photosynthesis first began, there was virtually no oxygen in the atmosphere. The atmosphere was about 20% carbon dioxide. And over the eons, plants and mineralization have changed that atmosphere to where it's about 20% oxygen, and with the help of humankind, it's up to 400 parts per million from 280 parts per million 150 years ago. So, at the time when photosynthesis originated, there was all this much more carbon dioxide, and these bacteria developed the ability to process this carbon dioxide at a far greater rate than is found in the atmosphere today. So that when you enrich, and plants have never lost this ability. So if plants have enough energy from light to break apart the carbon dioxide and start the photosynthesis process, they can do it at a much faster rate when the air is enriched with carbon dioxide. And I've proven that, I haven't proven it, it's been proven indoors and outdoors. And so that when you increase the rate of carbon dioxide in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you'll have a much faster growth rate without, as you said, any change to the potency of the plant. So if you're growing indoors and you're not using carbon dioxide, you're basically wasting electricity.
What do you think is the ideal parts per million?
1,200 to 1,500 parts of 5,000 foot candles. Okay, so you're basically wasting electricity because carbon dioxide is a far cheaper method of increasing production than using electricity to produce light. So let's say I was starting out and I was bootstrapping and I had a high pressure sodium light or something like that. Put it into the closet. Have a crop. The very next thing I would buy is not a second light. It would be a CO2 unit, because I'll get much more production out of that light and any subsequent lights that I buy. So that's one. So that way, I'm going to go, just give me a minute. So that's one part of you asked about both quantity and quality. Quality. Well, here in Hawaii, when you grow outdoors, sativas, equatorial sativas will express cannabinoids that they won't express stateside, because you get a lot more UV light and you get a lot more intensity of light. that that brings out certain certain cannabinoids such as CBG, which you'll find, or THCV, which you'll find in a lot of sativa.